Regent, and the Assistant Dean, together with this year's lecturer, Professor Lino N. A blessed morning to everyone, to our dear administrators, former and fellow academic staff, faculty members, students, our alumni and guests, non-academic staff and friends. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to today's gathering. Before we begin, let us give time for a prayer. May we call on Reverend Father George Themang of the Order of Preachers, Regent of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, to lead us in the morning prayer. This will be followed by the singing of the Philippine National Anthem. Please all rise.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty and loving God, as we gather in your presence today, we give thanks for the gift of wisdom, truth, and the pursuit of justice. You have called us to seek what is good, to defend what is right, and to uphold the dignity of every human being. We come before you now, asking for your guidance and blessing upon this St. Thomas More lecture event. Today, we reflect on the life and legacy of St. Thomas More, scholar, statesman, and saint, whose steadfast faith and commitment to truth continue to inspire us. His witness to conscience reminds us that integrity is not merely an ideal, but a way of life. As we explore his influence on the Filipino mind over the past 50 years, may we find in his example the courage to stand for what is right, the wisdom to discern what is true, and the humility to serve others with compassion and grace. Lord, bless our resource speaker, organizers, and participants. Grant them clarity of thought and depth of insight as they share knowledge and engage in meaningful dialogue. May this lecture be a space for reflection, learning, and a renewed commitment to the values of faith, reason, and justice. We lift up to you our nation, that we may continue to cultivate a society built on truth, integrity, and the common good. Like St. Thomas More, may we be men and women of principle, unafraid to stand for righteousness, always placing you at the center of our pursuits. May your wisdom guide our hearts and minds today and always. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord, through the intercession of St. Thomas More. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
You may now be seated.
Fresh from its foundation, the University of Santo Tomas Faculty of Arts and Letters had already begun establishing its identity as a seat of expertise and discourse in the humanities, arts and culture, and the social sciences, having been formed with the best of what the Faculty of Philosophy and Letters and the College of Liberal Arts had to offer. True enough, it was the vision of two stalwarts of the faculty, Ofelia Alcantara di Malanta, the poet and literary matriarch of the university, and Piedad Quinto Rosales, the literary pedagogue, that brought about the long-standing tradition of the St. Thomas More Lecture Series. In honor of the faculty's patron saint, the lecture series was realized in 1968, which saw the genuine desire to satisfy one's thirst for knowledge through continuous scholarly engagements across various fields of disciplines. The lecture series, inspired by the saint's love for knowledge, is the quintessence of the rich history and evolution of the faculty's unwavering pursuit of Catholic education in the country. Born in London on 1478, Thomas More was an ardent humanist, having written comedies, studying Greek and Latin literature, and translating several works of Lucian, an ancient Greek satirist. As well, he was a successful lawyer, but he was torn between a monastic calling and a life of civil service. But he determined to live in a nearby monastery where the practice of prayer, fasting, and penance were inculcated in him for the rest of his life. When his sense of duty to serve the country overcame monasticism, he entered Parliament and drew the ire of King Henry VII and later entered King Henry VIII's services. He would soon gain a reputation for being impartial and a patron to the poor. Before being executed, his final words were that he would die, the king's good servant, but God's first. As a learned man himself, Thomas More privileged education as a gift of supreme value through diligent writings and reading history and the classics, which he wrote about in his book Utopia, going as far by describing that the pursuit of knowledge is indefatigable. This is exemplified by the numerous educators, professors, university and school presidents, and UST rectors who have spoken regarding the role of learning in development. Trained in the monastic life, St. Thomas More valued a life guided by firm religiosity and virtue according to the divine. With God as the largest context in his life, he instilled on others the constant consciousness of what is transcendent and spiritual. Numerous priests, bishops, archbishops, and cardinals have conveyed their thoughts and ideas regarding the Church's relationship with society. As a statesman himself, Thomas More performed all his tasks with honesty and honor, like his father before him. His integrity is undoubtedly rooted in deep sense of family values, evident in his letter to his wife and children, as well as his firm stance in upholding what is just. An ombudsman, several Supreme Court justices, and chief justices have underscored the importance of truth and justice in a democracy like the Philippines over the years. Leaders from the highest offices of government, such as the presidents, a vice president, senate presidents, and appointed officials, demonstrated the moral excellence required for public service. Since More upheld a divine virtue, he believed that this life will lead to respectfully helping others in a society where no one desires to enlarge boundaries over others, and that businesses are beyond individuals' gains and losses, rather what a community endures as a collective. Several economic experts, corporate executives, urban planners, and Ramon Magsaysay awardees have articulated the possibilities for overcoming development issues and maximizing growth opportunities. St. Thomas More's appreciation of culture and the humanities, as well as his excellence in literature, made him a truly holistic person. He had worked not only to improve himself, but ingrained on the young ones rigors and the same yearning for the classical and Christian traditions. In this regard, a number of journalists, cultural experts, scholars, writers, literary titans, and national artists have spoken out about the importance of the arts, tradition, and media in cultivating a keen sense of nationalism. The Faculty of Arts and Letters is proud of its lecture series' longevity, let alone the roster of distinguished speakers who have graced the event over the years. This highlights the multidisciplinary nature of the annual St. Thomas More Lecture, anchored in his passion for learning and scholarship, genuinely complements the diverse disciplines and expertise that drive and flourish in the University of Santo Tomas. For a long time, the lecture series was the highlight of the Artlets College Week festivities, and despite changes in academic calendar in recent years, the college's centerpiece activity remains a constant part of its identity. The lecture series has demonstrated for more than 50 years that intellectual discourse is at the core of university life, strengthening scholarly pursuits and raising awareness of advancements in numerous fields of study. The lectures have addressed themes and concerns that have affected the country historically, including those from the post-war period, the martial law regime, the wake of the EDSA Revolution, the centennial of Philippine independence, and the quadricentennial of the University of Santo Tomas, among others. True to its vision and mission of producing motivated individuals who excel in their chosen fields and serve as models and leaders in society, guided by Thomasian ideals and the highest standards, the annual Thomas More Lecture is the Faculty of Arts and Letters' contribution to the university and the nation in the pursuit of social and spiritual transformation. As the administrators, faculty members, staff, students, and the alumni await the sixth decade of the faculty's existence in the university, may the work and teachings of St. Thomas More inspire every artlet as we usher in a new era of academic excellence.
And to continue the quality and excellence of the Thomas More Lecture this year on its 57th implementation of the Thomas More Lecture, and still a highlight of the anniversary, AB Week anniversary of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, we hold this year's Thomas More Lecture today. This celebration of the anniversary of the Faculty of Arts and Letters in time of its 60th founding anniversary as Faculty of Arts and Letters. To officially welcome us all, let's call on the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, Professor Melanie D. Turingan, PhD. Let's give her a round of applause, please.
To our Father Regent, Reverend Father George Pemang UP, Dean Michael Anthony C. Vasco, PhD, Dean of the UST Graduate School, and former Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Letters. To my fellow administrators, former administrators of the faculty who are here today. to our academic staff, to our alumni, to our retired academic employees, welcome home and welcome back. To our students, and most especially to our distinguished guest and lecturer, Professor Lino N. PhD. A pleasant morning to all. 57 years ago, as the newly established faculty are opening its doors to open more academic programs, former deans Opelia de Malanta and Piedad Rosales, both icons in their respective fields of expertise, conceptualize a lecture series which gives honors to the patron saint of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, St. Thomas More. Since then, this annual lecture series has been a trademark of the faculty, wherein each year, forerunners in different fields such as Philippine presidents and vice president, business and industry pioneers and practitioners, national artists, Supreme Court justices, members of the executive and legislative branches of government, and lastly, members of the clergy, graced this event and imprinted their names in the rich artlet's history. As we are in the culminating week of a month-long 60th founding anniversary of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, and as we are moving towards the lecture series' centennial anniversary, we are closing the first 50 years with a book that will cover all the speeches of our invited speakers, a first of its kind. It is a gift, wholeheartedly shared with us by our dear and beloved lecturer this morning. In this way, we will forever immortalize the essence of St. Thomas More, exemplified by the people who inspired the artlets community of his timeless contributions, and to share to the world that one's conscience and conviction should never be compromised, even if it means facing grave consequences in return. Thus, without further ado, it is just but fitting to commence the second half of the St. Thomas More Lecture by celebrating the journey and story of its first installment. Today, we celebrate the artlet's tradition of excellence by welcoming back and welcoming home our predecessors who took part in facilitating the colorful tradition of this lecture series. We will bear witness to a man who made all this possible, a true icon, and most importantly, a true artlet alumnus. A man like St. Thomas More is equipped with moral integrity and selflessness. A man who, instead of just enjoying the fruits of his hard work, decided to give something in return. You are truly our pride, sir. I am beyond blessed to be called your student. I hope that this lecture series will continue to serve as a catalyst for those seeking to make a positive difference in the world, upholding the values of justice, tolerance, and compassion that our patron saint has championed. A blessed day to all, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you very much, Dean Turingan. We now proceed to the main part of this morning's gathering. To introduce our distinguished lecturer, let me call on Ms. Regina Pato Agustin, Chair of the Department of Asian Studies. Let's give her a round of applause.
A pleasant morning to everyone. On this 60th foundation anniversary of our beloved Faculty of Arts and Letters, I am privileged to introduce to you our esteemed speaker at this special convocation for the 57th St. Thomas More Lecture. Please note that I did not use the term guest, because our lecturer is not a stranger or an outsider. Rather, someone whose incredible pride and joy is to be called an artlet and a Thomasian. I consider him an institution in UST and the Faculty of Arts and Letters. In the history of the St. Thomas More Lecture, only 2 faculty members so far have been given the honor and privilege to speak in front of the Artlets community. Dr. Emerita Quito, faculty member of philosophy in 1970, and Professor Lourdes S. Bautista, coordinator and faculty of English and Literature in 1972. Now, after 53 years, we have a third speaker among us faculty members, who no doubt deserves his place among the illustrious line of speakers of this tradition. He is no other than Professor Lino N. Baron, PhD. Dr. Baron has been a faculty member in the Faculty of Arts and Letters since 1987 and holds the academic rank of professor. He obtained his PhD in Southeast Asian Studies in 2014, and since then, his rich and vibrant academic journey has encompassed the entire range of classroom teaching and advising, stewardship as faculty secretary and department chair, research paper presentations, lectures, participation in academic exchange programs, research workshops, linkages and benchmarking activities, recipient of scholarship grants, largely short-term courses from universities in Taiwan and Japan, and involvement in outreach programs, all in the local, national, and international arena. Being an Asian studies specialist, he is the author of a full-length book entitled Intersections of Civilization, A History of Philippines-Korea Relations, which was published in October 2015 by Songkyunkwan University in Seoul, South Korea. Later this morning, he will also launch his book, Celebrating More, the St. Thomas More Lecture Series 1968 to 2019, a unique and special piece, The Dream Wish Fulfilled. This publication highlights his dedication to excellence and strong commitment to nurturing the passion for learning and preserving things of lasting value. In our professional and academic circles, undeniably, Dr. Baron is someone who has arrived, dumating na, or nakarating na. And on a lighter note, if I may add, may dating, or with presence. Always impeccably dressed, with his trademark starched shirts. Siya na lang po yata ang nagpapatronize ng Liwayway Gawgaw. Exquisitely scented, and with the power walk of long, brisk strides, and the booming voice, which is unmistakably Dr. Lino Baron. Ladies and gentlemen, with pride and pleasure, may I present to you our 57th St. Thomas More lecturer, my mentor, and a mentor to many of us here in this auditorium, Professor Lino N. Baron, PhD. Let us welcome him with a warm round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you to my chair, Ms. Regina Pato. Bukas turuan kita kung paano mag-almirol. No? Professor Melanie Turingan, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, Reverend Father George Pemang, the Regent of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, Assistant Dean Dr. John Cliachco, Faculty Secretary Dr. Louis Ignacio, the former Dean and the current Dean of the Graduate School, Professor Michael Anthony D. Vasco, department chairs, academic and administrative officials, esteemed colleagues, my former colleagues who were able to make it. They're still alive. Some of them already passed away. Well, at least they're here, no? And thank you for that. Dear students, guests, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning to everyone. The memorandums from the AB Dean's Office read, all faculty members and students, St. Thomas More Lecture will be on February 25, 9 a.m. Medicine Auditorium. Please be punctual. Attendance is required. It is February and the event is another St. Thomas More Lecture. It is more special this time because it is a milestone for the college as it celebrates its 60th anniversary. On this occasion, too, will be the launching of my book publication, Celebrating More, the St. Thomas More Lecture Series, 1968 to 2019. Perhaps it is the only one in the university written in honor of the college or the faculty's patron saint. For the Artlets community, the St. Thomas More Lecture is certainly much more than the annual sentimental ritual that has become a part of our otherwise routine-bound lives. So minutes earlier, all of us Artlets, faculty and students, walked, ran, trudged, plodded, trooped, or marched towards this cavernous auditorium, which has been the venue of the previous St. Thomas More lectures. Now comfortably seated amidst the cool ambience of this auditorium and admiring the exquisitely decorated stage, we quietly await the start of the program. How does one begin? On my part, I must confess, with a lump in my throat, I felt so uneasy there in the corridor a while ago, unsure of how to articulate the many things running in my mind. I am so touched and moved by this distinct honor and privilege that has been accorded to me, for which I will forever be grateful. I am likewise aware that my audience is a critical, if not a skeptical one, but I must proceed and do justice to my task this morning. I cannot delude myself into believing that I can readily approximate the prominent national and academic personalities, the likes of Bienvenido Lumbera, Senator Rovito Salonga, Ambassador Jaime Sobel de Ayala, Nick Joaquin, President Aquino, President Diosdado Macapagal, Cardinal Rosales, Sin, the past rectors, the past national artists, luminaries, all who have invited to deliver insightful lectures on strategic and important concerns and issues along their lines of expertise, while foregrounding the contemporary relevance of the ideas and ideals of St. Thomas More. I offer no apologies. I studied hard, did my homework assiduously, and I can now confidently declare that I have earned the right to speak on the topic of this morning's forum after completing the writing of the book. For many years, when Dean Vasco was still the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, he would always say to the committee involved in the Thomas More, if the speaker is not of high impact, there is no Thomas More. I am sorry, Dean Vasco, that the 57th lecturer is not a high-impact personality, but high-strung. Now, just a brief background on how the book project came about. As faculty member for many years, I took it upon myself to be the guardian of the office files on the St. Thomas More Lecture Series, and that includes the text of most of the speeches that were provided by lecturers. Being a somewhat obsessive-compulsive individual, OSI, I also kept copies of invitation letters, acceptance letters, programs, text of the plaques of recognitions. Is the faculty secretary listening? That will be your duty. Previews of all this have been included as part of the appendices of the book and intended for the curious ones who would like to see how simple things were when the lecture series started in 1968 to the time that it was leveled to up to this grand celebration. Years after years, as the next event is prepared, I get a glimpse of the yellowed pages and realizing the richness of the presentations. The idea of getting this task in a single volume would be an intellectual legacy that the college can leave behind for future AB students. Indeed, that was a moment of illumination, a dream that slowly began to take shape. Please note that these lectures covered the years from 1968 to 2019. a period that spanned more than 50 years. 2019, because that was the time that Dean Vasco and Father Regent Aligan gave me the opportunity to take a sabbatical leave. The files of the college could only produce 13 original texts. Retrieving the original text of the series proved to be the challenge. Issues of the Versitarian, the Academia, the Thomasian, and other university publications were excellent sources of excerpts, photographs, and coverage of the events. This supplemented what in the end emerged as a voluminous and rich collection of primary and secondary sources that needed to be sorted, inventoried, and organized into a coherent essay. Things unfolded in ways I never quite expected. Despite the divergence of the topics of the presentations, they were clearly inspired by the faculty's patron saint, converged in some aspect of the ideas, life, and writings of St. Thomas More, and presented contemporary insights on concerns shared by contemporary Filipinos and St. Thomas More himself. Therefore, the most daunting task in organizing the existing lectures were bridging the gap of 500 years between St. Thomas More and the contemporary Filipino, and the intercultural gap between the values of England at the threshold of the Renaissance and the contemporary Filipino, largely educated in the classical tradition in a university setting. The existing lectures with or available excerpts guided the process of organizing the text of the volume and the emergence of the following themes: the importance of education, spirituality and religiosity, law and political order, stewardship, business and development, arts and culture. The emerging essay thus focuses on the fundamental ideas of More on each of these subjects and how his discourses are enriched by the lecturer's insights in the discussion of contemporary Philippine events and situations in various historical contexts from martial law to the period following the EDSA Revolution. Join me as we now delve more closely into the multifaceted life of St. Thomas More, the intricate tapestry of his character and his enduring influence of the Filipino mind in the more than 50 years of the St. Thomas More Lecture Series. Huwag kayong matutulog. More's personal life was lived with living devotion to family and friends, and an integrity guided by his articulations and beliefs. His excellence as a scholar and his distinguished career as a public servant, regardless of function and rank, which included the office of Lord Chancellor of the Realm, were celebrated in his lifetime and affirmed by his peers and fellow scholars in England and in the continent. The epitaph, bearing his self-perception, illustrates that the young Thomas was trained rigorously in humanist and biblical scholarship through systematic mentorship within the best educational institutions in England. At Thomas More's encouragement, the same training and scholarship was given to his children, regardless of sex or gender. This rigorous training, as a person of deep faith and a committed professional, becomes evident during the later years in Thomas More's career as a respected public servant. Towards the end, More's epitaph, inom lang ako. Kasama na ang kabadon. Towards the end, More's epitaph reflects on his career as a public servant, which is an embodiment of the human values taught by his father. These are the same values which More sought to instill on his own children. St. Thomas More privileged education as a gift of supreme value for his children. He emphasized the exercise of certain values related to education or learning. One thing, however, I admonish you, he said, whether you write serious matters on the merest trifles, it is my wish that you write everything diligently and thoughtfully. A letter to his children. St. Thomas More's writings defined the scope of learning and education to include an education in the classics. Book 2 of the Utopia, which focused on the utopians' love for learning and described the enthusiasm of the people of Utopia for the learning process. And I quote, "Their pursuit of knowledge is indefatigable. When we had given them some hints of learning and discipline of the Greeks, of whom alone we instructed them, for we know there was nothing among the Romans except the historians and poets that they would much esteem. It was strange to see with what avidity they set about learning that language." Unquote. Senator Francisco Tatad, in his lecture delivered in 1974, resonated the idea of St. Thomas More advocating the value of liberal or classical education. He said, "There is a need for a liberal arts education in an age revolutionized by scientific and technological developments. The study of the humanities enhances the definition of man and the direction he is heading. In fact, in the view of Tatad, the need for a liberal arts and humanities education is more compelling as a response to the challenges posed by science and technology. Humanities should be imbued in sciences, since science must be enlisted in the cause of men and not otherwise. There should be a union of the poet, the artist on one hand, and the physicist and scientist on the other." To substantiate this view, Wilfredo Noliedo, lecturer of the previous year, 1973, asserted that books tear down barriers as literature itself widens horizons. If literature must develop axially, all the more it must progress vertically. For essentially, literature should be bringing us closer to God. The emergence of the development of society as the goal of education transcending the humanization of the individual is the focus of St. Thomas More's discourse. Education, in the view of Jesus Estanislao, focuses on a development that demands commitment. It has to point to realistic possibilities by using Philippine standards and not the levels of achievements of Europe, US, and Japan. He enriched the discussion by the observation that education for development pleads for national enrichment that comes for our openness by using Philippine standards and not the levels. Education for development pleads for national enrichment that comes from our openness to the rest of the world. We have to be cautious against parochialism, narrow provincialism, and prudent nationalism. These attitudes clearly foster negativism and are counterproductive to achieving meaningful development. Estanislao concluded his presentation with the assertion that the goal of education today should be towards economic development Economic development requires that the government provide the economic leadership for the nation's good rather than be abused for the private gain of a few. Pacifico Castro, lecturer for the series of 1985, on the other hand, effectively and seamlessly summarized the strong links between the Renaissance-based ideas of More and the 20th century initiatives in education in this context. The concept of development includes two major aspects when related to youth: the growth of the total personality and an individual, and the total entity of local and national development. Development should be seen as a process of enhancing the capability of individuals to the betterment of the society. Salvador Lopez, President of the University of the Philippines and lecturer of 1977, observed that the value of education in society is a powerful element of social control, and an educational society must be attuned towards the development of man, his physical, intellectual, spiritual, and moral attributes. Education must be geared towards the formation of man as a useful member of society. From the context of public tertiary education, Lopez affirmed Moore's belief in the total development process focused on social betterment. Subsequent lectures examined the ground-level realities that confront humanist education and social development. Salvador Lopez further noted that a coward university with timid professors and servile students is not the best place for students to learn. The best education requires an atmosphere of academic freedom, for it takes free men to produce free men. When authoritarian rule prevails, the pressure of conformity becomes the governing principle, and education degenerates into the training of docile citizens. Clearly, this statement addressed the concerns of repression that accompanied the declaration of martial rule in 1972. Another UP president, Edgardo Angara, who also served as Senate President, and the 2014 lecturer of the series, discussed the elements that limit the effectiveness of education and its contemporary challenges as an agency of human development. School reform is long overdue. Mass unemployment of the youth can only be solved by structural reforms and curricular changes. Such educational reforms will ensure our youth are adequately equipped with skills and competencies fit for the global workplace. They will also assure that our growth momentum is sustained. Learning can no longer be delivered through a role system, imparting static knowledge and skill. It must be viewed as an ongoing dynamic process characterized as lifelong learning. Education boosts skills and develops competencies, providing individuals better chances at living more productive lives. Education also imparts necessary values which will help in keeping societies together and more cohesive. In retrospect, and in the context of post-martial law period, Edmundo Garcia, member of the 1987 Constitutional Commission and lecturer for 1989, issued this challenge to educators. Education for democracy is learned through the exercise of democracy. It has to be experienced as people come together and try, explore, and experiment, reform and revise, recreate, and reinvent. In this process, democracy is experienced as human liberation. The challenges that face youth and teachers in times like ours are indeed difficult and immense. The transition to democracy will take time. The changes our people demand will not take place in the lifetime of one administration, perhaps not even in the span of a generation. The Catholic University and the challenges for humanist education and social development. Father Leonardo Legaspi, OP, UST Rector and lecturer for 1978, discussed the issue of education as the main task of the university. The role of the Catholic school is to help create a new international order through the transmission of a social education, embracing society's economic, political, and cultural problems, and infused with a Christian dimension, upholding the solidarity of men as sons of God. The end result of such an education will be the truly universal man who will be able to break the fetters of his egocentricity in a sincere effort to initiate social and economic reforms. This was resonated by Gaudencio Cardinal Rosales, lecturer for 2008, who asserted that the social teaching of the Church points toward an integral form of humanism, which the liberation from everything that oppresses man and the development of man and of every man. The first task of education towards justice is to liberate the individual person from the enslavement imposed by ignorance, selfish attitudes, and the greed that seek oneself. Ako muna. In everything. The second duty is to free the person from selfish values. Ako lamang. And ultimately from sin, which is the root of the all enslavements and vices. Freed from these subjugations, the enlightened person can reach out to others in respect and fairness. Ostensibly, today, the university is emerging as the best site as conceptualized by St. Thomas More for the greater appreciation of the increasing value of a humanist education that ensures the emergence of a just and equitable social order. Father Frederick Fermin, OP, rector of the university and lecturer for the 1984 segment of the series, underscored the need for focusing on role models to enhance the effectiveness of education through the emulation of men of faith like St. Thomas More and St. Thomas Aquinas. Our age needs saints, not politicians. We truly need men like St. Thomas More. The University of Santo Tomas has produced saints in the past. May it produce also the saints that are needed today to lead the Philippines to a happier future. Bishop Teodoro Bacani, lecturer for the series in 1990, believed that saints are not only for our admiration, they are for our imitation. At this stage, the most important question is to ask how we can develop a character like that of St. Thomas More. President Diosdado Macapagal, an alumnus of the university, during his lecture in 1986, discussed an important insight into the interconnectedness of faith and the life, or a life guided by faith. As a Thomasian, with faith in both St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Thomas More, in their wisdom and in their knowledge of truth and how to know it, and with fidelity to our alma mater, I need no more to express the conviction that the University of Santo Tomas and the Thomasians cannot be indifferent to the current travail of our nation. As the only Christian nation in Asia, ours is in a true sense a country of God. Our people need salvation for the maintenance of their Christian faith and the redemption from both domestic and foreign despotism, as well as from the equally vicious tyranny of an unending mass poverty and social injustice. Chief Justice Hilario Davide, lecturer for the series in 2003, further asserted that Thomasians should follow the ideals of St. Thomas More in promoting justice in the country. Transparency, accountability, and impartiality are very important in creating a good judicial system. While St. Thomas More's love for scholarship and learning is unsurpassed among his peers, he instilled in his children the constant consciousness of what is transcendent and spiritual. God remains steadfastly and unwavering. The largest context of St. Thomas More's life, like the biblical Job, St. Thomas More's steadfast and unwavering faith shines in the midst of adversity. St. Thomas More valued a life guided by firm religiosity and a life of virtue, ordered according to nature created by the divine. Senator Roselina, alumnus of the College of Arts and Letters and lecturer for 2005, affirmed that God is truly, as St. Thomas More believed, the largest all-encompassing context of human existence. In his discussion of leadership, Lina challenged contemporary leaders to emulate St. Thomas More. Leaders should possess St. Thomas More's brand of leadership. 7 aspects. First, the balance between love and family. Second, fidelity to duty. Between humility and confidence. Between prudence and courage. Between commitment to the King and the absolute loyalty to God. Between acknowledging human failings and unconditional forgiveness. Between seriousness of purpose and the joy of living, and between high learning and common touch. Given the context of a Christ-inspired faith, Professor Lourdes Siquia Bautista, lecturer for 1972, for the series insightfully explained that the Christian vision is what makes a person feel and see things as Christ would, while asserting that although faith is a mystery because some have it and others don't, the individual is a mystery himself because human beings do not merit faith, even as St. Thomas More epitomizes the man of faith during his time. In the midst of martial rule, Jaime Cardinal Sin, lecturer for the series in 1982, rationalized the church's participation in the political life of a nation with a dominant Catholic majority. Church intervention in politics should always be in the name of the people of God and the moral and spiritual dimensions that affect them. We cannot blame the regime alone for the present state of affairs, but that we should also blame ourselves because we compose this society and share the responsibility for the kind of society that we have. This view taken by the Filipino cardinal personifies a steadfast adherence to the faith and trust in the goodness of God and St. Thomas More, exemplified in situations where secular and, in this instance, political concerns stand in collision course with the Christian belief. Again, in the 1984 lecture, Father Frederick Fermin, OP, rector of the University of Santo Tomas, resonated More's belief in Christian forgiveness and good faith, which the saint articulated before he was beheaded at the Tower of London. Reconciliation is not an optional attitude for the Christian. The Christian professes to be a follower of Christ, and Christ obviously lived his life to bring about the reconciliation of man with God and of people among themselves for God's sake. The Christian who rejects reconciliation as a way of life rejects the Christian way of life and implicitly Christ himself. Reconciliation is more than a political alternative. It is a Christian imperative. Reconciliation will never succeed unless it is inspired by a sincere love of the truth. For the Christian, God is truth. God's truth is revealed in Christ. Reconciliation, therefore, will never succeed unless it be inspired by a sincere love of Christ. Only when we seek to establish the kingdom of truth, which is Christ's kingdom, may we hope to succeed, though it may be at the price of a share in Christ's cross. The ideas of reconciliation, which Father Fermin OP discussed clearly, establish the contemporary relevance of St. Thomas More's ideas on the power of faith, goodness, and the greater good, and the bridge the cultural and centuries-old gap between more and the contemporary Catholicism in this country. Excuse me. In his 1995 lecture, Oscar Orbos, members of the President's Cabinet, candidly stated that if there is something that should make us proud as Filipinos, it should be faith in ourselves and faith in God. When St. Thomas More was about to be beheaded, he was not afraid because he had faith in God. Moreover, Orbos in his lecture expressed his admiration for St. Thomas More's humility and obedience to the divine will. Humility is the mother of all virtues. It's by being humble that you achieve excellence. In the instance of St. Thomas More, something more precious than excellence is achieved: sainthood. More started his professional career as a lawyer, a practitioner in the public realm, and an under-sheriff of London, and an appointee of Henry VIII. During the course of his career, he occupied several positions in government. He performed all his tasks with honesty and honor, like his father John, before him, prosecuting thieves, murderers, and heretics. Associate Justice Claudio T. Hanqui, in the 1969 lecture of the series, emphasized that the basic principle of real democratic society is to establish a government founded on law and not on man, and the disregard of one may create disorder in the country. Liberty with responsibility and a non-biased and effective implementation of laws are the characteristics of a democratic society. Liberty prevents the country from degenerating to autocracy and law from anarchy. The ills of society are due to the wrong attitudes of the people, specifically the Filipino, to the moral values. Most people will not obey the laws if they know they can get away with the consequences anyway. Peace in the country without justice is not actually peace, but only a semblance which will not last long. On the other hand, Vice President Salvador Laurel, in his 1988 lecture, observed that as long as utopia remains a dream, ruthless man will always exploit that dream to entice people to join them in the bid to seek utopian powers by peaceful means if possible and by force if necessary. Political activists, human rights advocate, and academic freedom. Again, Edmundo Garcia, lecturer for 1989, on the other hand, asserted that politics is essentially the organization of power. In all societies, there are rulers and ruled, gainers and losers. The problem often revolves around the participation of people in decision-making and in the sharing of the fruits of the land. Power exercised without principles is tyranny, and power employed at the expense of the majority is despotism. In Garcia's view, service is the key. Power should be used to serve people, to protect them, save them, and give them freedom. Professor Crispin Maslog, in his 2018 presentation, articulated his belief that assaults to democracy, due process, and the press were a slippery slope to authoritarianism. To keep our democracy alive and robust, we need to keep our public sphere open. We should allow all stakeholders in our way of life and in our government free access to our marketplace of thought. Foreign Affairs Secretary Alberto Del Rosario, lecturer for the series in 2013, introduced the discussion of the Filipino quest for meaningful and substantive sovereignty and a law-based order in the Southeast Asian region, given the need for that urgent resolution among its peers of the problem over territorial claims in the West Philippine Sea. The Philippine government has always espoused a rules-based approach and respect for international law in addressing conflicts involving disputes or territories, or exclusive economic zones, or EEZ, and has maintained a cordial but vigilant relations with other countries that have overlapping interests with the national interest of the Philippines. Now, the Philippines are considered a rising economic and political player in the geopolitics of the Asia-Pacific region. It is important for the state to assert its rights, to protect its economic and political interest, and at the same time be mindful of the possible effects of such political assertions, such as possible conflict with other nation-states. Bishop Teodoro Bacani, lecturer of the series in 1990, argued against the prevalence of corruption in the Philippines, largely attributed to the ascendancy of martial rule, that privilege the enrichment of a few attached to those who wield power. The worst thieves are the most corrupt people in our society, are very often not those who look like thieves, but people who look very respectable and prosperous. We are living in the age of the image, where public perception is often more important for many people than the reality of their lives. We Filipinos are very good at pakikisama, but sometimes we become completely dependent on what our kasamahan want, and we feel compelled to follow the crowd. Stealing from public funds is much more food plucked from the mouths of the starving. So many more chains binding us, plunging us deeper into the slaving spiral of poverty from which we are begging to be extricated with outside help. Jesus Estanislao, president of the University of Asia and the Pacific, in 2002, lecturer for the series, wholeheartedly concurred with the notion that poverty does trace its origins from corruption. Corruption in the government contributes to the country's increasing poverty rate and takes the wind of our economic sail. Filipinos have been disunited because of self-centeredness. Even if Filipinos had the uncanny ability to unite during emergencies as manifested by People Power 1 and 2. Filipinos should be responsible enough to improve society because the direction of social development has been flowed, with some indicators showing retrogress instead of progress. These are the three fundamental elements to catalyze change in the society. The elements are the rule of law, the establishment of institutions, and the formulation and implementation of correct policies. Hilario Davide, Jr., Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and lecturer for 2003, asserted that reforming the justice system starts by gaining the public's trust. Public confidence cannot be manufactured. It must be earned. The appropriate strategy is less talk, less promises, more action, more result. Only when the public fully understands and appreciates the justice system can we truly say that we had won people's faith and trust. The judiciary would continue to persevere in developing reforms to convince the people that the institution is dedicated in serving justice. Associate Justice Ramon Paul Hernando, the last of the lecturer that I was able to research, lecturer for 2019 segment of the series, further affirmed that truth transcends everything. You cannot possibly imagine a world without truth because that would not exist. Without truth, justice is a perversion of what it should have been. Truth is an instrument of change. Its role should be central to our lives. The humility to acknowledge the truth should lead to a good and just result. That, to me, is better than transformation. It is being faithful to the truth. St. Thomas More, without a doubt, is a model head of the family and advocate of family values shown by his deep concern and love for his wife and children, as evident in his letters to his wife and children. Ombudsman Chairperson Conchita Carpio Morales' exposition for the 2017 lecture focused on the issues that, while there is no absolute cure to corruption, prevention appears to be the only antidote against it. A family that possesses strong value aids in the prevention of corruption. The strength of a nation derives from the strength and integrity of the home. The character of a nation is the sum of collective values that each family upholds. These excerpts from the works of St. Thomas More provides on his attitudes towards the acquisition of material goods and how this inform responsible ownership and the long-term development of human beings and society. Philippine Ambassador to the Court of St. James, Jaime Sobel de Ayala, in his 1976 lecture observed that if St. Thomas More were alive today, he would approve of the private corporations operating at present. This is not contrary to the communal sharing of St. Thomas envisioned in his utopia. It is not the institution of private property that Saint would frown upon, but rather flaunted wealth, especially extravagance, which is an insult to the new societies of the world. In the Philippine context, Sobel de Ayala proposed that there are two alternatives by which government could participate in the economic activities of private enterprise. The first alternative is for the government to increase its regulations over the activities of private enterprise. The other is for the government to go into actual business and compete with private enterprises. The responsibility of the government is to bridge the social and economic barrier that exists between classes. In his presentation in 1975, Senator Jovita Salonga observed that all multinational corporations are basically profit-motivated, and it is naive to think that they are here for our country's development. Multinationals can be compared to pumps sucking the wealth out of the country. Local technocrats connive with these foreign giants and even court them in the name of national government. It is not surprising thus, according to Salonga, that today, development of a few is confused with national development. We must distinguish between the development of the socio-political elite and the global corporations on one side and that of the masses of the Filipino on the other. Excuse me. Kalahati pa. Konti na lang to. Sayang naman. 50 years pa naman to. Oh, okay. 50 years is 50 years and you only gave me 1 hour. Okay. Senator Blas Ople, nearly 3 decades hence during his 2000 lecture, interrogated the emerging globalization and how this informs development. Leaders should chart the country's roads towards globalization without sacrificing moral considerations and democracy. While globalization offers benefits to a developing country like the Philippines, we cannot close our eyes to its downside. The market system usually harms the more vulnerable sectors. Governments must temper the excesses of the market and maintain social rather than simply economic balance. Prime Minister Cesar Virata, in his 2011 lecture, enriched the same grounding, the discussion in greater detail on corporate responsibility concerns. Business ethics is the foundation for fair business practice. It is not always a question of making money. Being truthful, trustworthy, and aware of your responsibility to your co-workers, customers, and the community, and above all, having faith in God and being inspired by His teachings, should be the core values you take with you when you enter the field of business. We should remember St. Thomas More's teaching about selfishlessness. Selfishlessness is purifying. It is an antidote against the widespread disease of corruption. It is the common denominator that will determine how we will fulfill our economic, social, and developmental responsibilities. In his 2010 lecture, Attorney Antonio Oposa Jr. lamented the destruction of nature in this context. The Philippine marine ecosystem is one of the world's richest, but it is also one of the most abused. Today, only 5% of coral reefs in the Philippines remain pristine. 70% of the country's mangrove forests have been logged or converted to other uses. Hello? Ancheta? Nakikinig ka ba? Half of all seagrass beds are now either lost or severely degraded. I am convinced that the situation can be reversed for the sake of future generations. My dream is for the Filipinos to unleash their natural genius in our love for nature and show the world how to live sustainably. Oposa believed that the law is important as a tool for thinking, and that to save the environment, there must be a revolution of the mind, of attitudes. In his 2016 lecture, Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio expressed his deep concern of the need to use the law to protect the environment and the nation's resources. During that time, we were 105 million pa. We are 105 million Filipinos. There is not enough fish for us in the West Philippine Sea. Why will we allow the Chinese to fish when they can scoop all the fish and don't allow us to fish in their own waters? Of course, there's no fish there anymore. Beijing aims to control the sea without firing a single shot. It employs the three warfare strategy of psychological operations, media manipulation, and legal lamented destruction, the destruction of nature in this context, maneuvers. He therefore believes that all citizens of the Philippines, both government personnel and private individuals, have a solemn duty to prevent the loss of our huge maritime space to China. It is a duty we owe to ourselves and to future, but it is also one of the most abused. St. Thomas More was educated in the classical tradition, and his biographers document the close relations between More and distinguished scholars and thinkers in England and in the continent who were his contemporaries. St. Thomas More's discourses and writings show his love for the classical forms of Western civilization from Greek and Roman cultures, and how these subsequently form an integral part of the evolving Christian culture. These are evident in his discussions on the different aspects on the ways of life in utopia, which enshrined in an idealized society the convergence of Christian values and Greek and Roman culture. His English translation of the biography of Pico della Mirandola, authored by this significant Italian Renaissance figure's nephew, displays his admiration for this contemporary of Lorenzo de' Medici. His allusions to images from Greek, Roman cultures, and biblical sources dominate his non-literary and literary discourses. Again, Senator Francisco Tatad, in his 1974 lecture, affirmed the value of liberal education rooted in the classics as the most important component for the humanization process and for the setting meaningful life goals. There is a need, sa atin yan, for a liberal arts education in an age revolutionized by scientific and technological developments. The study of the humanities enhances the definition of man and the direction he is heading. Humanity should be imbued in sciences, since science must be enlisted in the cause of men and not otherwise. There should be a union of the poet, the artist on one hand, and the physicist and the scientist on the other. So, we are proud being in the humanities-based college. Prime Minister Cesar Virata, during his 2011 lecture, insightfully expanded the value of a humanist education as an important facet of practical education. You are lucky to be studying business and economics within a university because a liberal education will enable you to be aware of the causes of changing environment, thus helping you to navigate through these challenges and to sustain your selected course of action through your careers. It takes wide knowledge, great effort, and good judgment to enter into business enterprise over time. It takes the ability to employ critical thinking for every decision to encourage creativity and the desire to discover new things and not to fear innovation. These two lecturers affirmed the esoteric, social, and economic value of a liberal education rooted in the classics and Christian tradition. Karunungan, on the other hand, in his 1968 lecture lamented the fact that Filipinos can read, but we do not read. The Philippines has the lowest percentage of readership throughout the world. The Filipino writers does not have a living acquaintance with the English language. Our English is chop suey English, a conglomeration of the different English languages that have been studied in the Philippines. We must be Filipinos when we write, and we must write from our hearts and about the best things we want to write about. Oscar Orbos, lecturer for 1995, observed additionally that Filipinos as a people are not proud of themselves. They believe according to the norms of the culture of mediocrity. As a people, we love to criticize and put down ourselves. Bienvenido Lumbera, during his second lecture in the series in 2007, however, in the midst of the scathing criticism of Filipinos as artists and readers, viewers asserted that it is written in Filipino, but translated by my good friend, our former faculty member, Reynaldo Candido. Reading a poem or a novel is also our way of integrating ourselves in the process that the writer went through when he wrote the work. And this, I think, is an experience that introduces us to the work of literature that brings us back from the world of fiction towards reality. This is contrary perhaps to the common belief that reading is a way of escape from real life. For me, as a critic, reading should be viewed as a way of an enlightened confrontation in facing real life. Clearly, Lumbera, like Thomas More, believed that the emergence of national culture is the product of the dynamic interaction between the artist and the viewer, and or reader during the different period of a nation's history, thereby enriching the nation's evolving literary tradition. The importance of craft cannot be underestimated. UST architectural alumnus Felino Palafox Jr., in his 2015 lecture, explained that in the context of the visual arts and built heritage structures, architecture is an art. Science, technology, profession, economy, and a business. It should be precise, but it should also have a humane quality. Architecture is an experiential, functional, and visual art. Architecture in the Philippines is the amalgamation of various contexts: environmental, sociocultural, physical, island tropical, among others. To this, Palafox added that there are 5 ingredients for successful cities and countries elsewhere in the world: visionary leadership, strong political will, good planning, good design, and good governance. We have many people, capable Filipino architects, urban planners, engineers, and scientists who are creative, innovative, and know the solutions to problems, and work towards a common good. In his 2005 lecture again, Jose Lina observed that leaders should possess St. Thomas More's brand of leadership, seventh aspect: the balances between love and family and fidelity to duty, between humility and confidence, between prudence and courage, between commitment to the king and absolute loyalty to God, between acknowledging human feelings and unconditional forgiveness, between seriousness of the purpose and the joy of living, between high learning and common touch. According to Nick Joaquin, national artist, is in his 1981 lecture. Patapos na tayo. If Thomas More is a bridge, he is a bridge only for us today, who can through him seek a way back to the integration of sensibility. For he was no bridge for his time, when his humanistic vision clashed against the rising nationalism of Europe. The unity of faith and reason had collapsed. Knowledge was becoming fragmented and sensibility became dissociated. If Thomas More was a religious martyr, he was also a cultural martyr, because he opposed in King Henry VIII more than just a conjugal divorce. The divorce that Thomas More really opposed was a divorce between what we now call the two cultures. The divorce between the world of the humanities and the world of practical sciences. This enigma of the presumed dichotomy between the non-utilitarian humanism and human development fostered by classical and Christian learning vis-a-vis the more pragmatic concerns of the sciences, the social sciences, and the practical arts is resolved by Nick Joaquin himself, as he enumerates how Filipino lives during the colonial period are enriched by proselytizing agencies of the conquering powers. Thus, we now can say that it was Christ in the person of a Jesuit who in the 16th century introduced masonry in the Philippines, built our first stone edifice, started the quarrying of Philippine adobe, was the first to teach us the art of painting, and experimented with the growing of mulberry trees here and the local manufacture of silk cloth. It was Christ in the person of an Augustinian who turned indigo into a major Philippine manufacture and export. It was Christ in the person of a Franciscan who established our first school, our first hospital, our first leper asylum. And again, Christ in the person of this or that recollect who carried the new tools to Mindanao and there started the fight against the slave trade. And again, Christ in the person of an Augustinian who by producing the first complete and correct map of the Philippines made it an entity visible to all the world, made it form and shape recognizable and familiar to all Filipinos, and thus established the image of the Philippines and the idea of Philippine nationalism. It can even be said that this land did not exist as the Philippines until it emerged, fully revealed in that missionary's map. Clearly, in the Philippine context, Christianity is the conjuncture where national culture converges with classical culture, a phenomenon that began during the Spanish colonization period, as it seamlessly permeates all aspects of the Filipino life today. These, ladies and gentlemen, were the thoughts given by, again, for the words of Dr. Michael Vasco, high-impact Filipino personalities invited to deliver the St. Thomas More Lecture in half a century history of the Faculty of Arts and Letters. This is how St. Thomas More, in his lifetime, lived and what he achieved. Sandali lang. Nawawala yung mga papel ko. In conclusion, I wish to end this talk by expressing my sincerest thanks to Dean Melanie Turingan, to Reverend Father George Pemang OP, to Assistant Dean John Kliachko, to our Faculty Secretary Louis Ignacio, esteemed colleagues, dear students, for this momentous opportunity to share the contents of this book, Celebrating More, the St. Thomas More Lecture Series, 1968 to 2019. This is not really an ending, for every ending signals a beginning. I hope and pray that the Faculty of Arts and Letters will continue the tradition with the same zeal and optimism unraveled by the initial talks. And another book will see print in the near future, Volume 2. I may be dead by that time. I would like to thank that ultimately significance of celebrating the 50 years of this series through the publication of this Volume 1 is the documentation of the Faculty of Arts and Letters' struggle to remain faithful to its mission vision to sustain an incisive, insightful, and discursive community of scholars and intellectuals inspired by its patron saint, St. Thomas More. To end this lecture, please allow me to paraphrase the immortal words said by our patron saint before he was beheaded at the Tower Hill at the Tower of London. I, Lino N. for 38 years, is the University of Santo Tomas faithful servant, but God's first.
Another round of applause to our very own Professor Lino N, PhD. Congratulations, sir. Now, with the permission of Dean Mike, we may change that quotation. Speakers with high impact and Lino Baron. That will be the that will be the new quotation now. Every time that we plan and introduce the Thomas More Lecture. Again, to our distinguished lecturer, Professor Lino N. Baron, thank you very much for that wonderfully made summary, if not an analysis of at least 13, but half a century of speeches from all the lecturers of the St. Thomas More Lecture Series. Again, this is a very good opportunity, not only for us, artlets, current and alumni, but also for the University of Santo Tomas to really see the beauty of social sciences, humanities, through our patron saint, St. Thomas More. Before we proceed with the other parts of this morning's program and to give a breather after that information coming from Dr. Baron. Let's have a short intermission coming from the Artlets Chorus of Arts and Letters. Let's give them a round of applause.
I close my eyes and I can see a world that's waiting up for me, that I call my own. Through the dark, through the door, through where no one's been before, but it feels like home. They can say it all sounds crazy. They can say I've lost my mind. I don't care, so call me crazy. We can live in a world that we design. Every night I lie in bed, the brightest colors fill my head. A million dreams are keeping me awake. I think of what the world could be, a vision of the one I see. A million dreams is all it's gonna take. Oh, a million dreams for a world we're gonna make. There's a house we can build, every room inside is filled with things from far away. Special things I compile, each one there to make you smile on a rainy day. They can say it all sounds crazy. They can say we've lost our mind. I don't care if they call us crazy. Run away to a world that we design. Every night I lie in bed, the brightest colors fill my head. A million dreams are keeping me awake. I think of what the world could be, a vision however big, however small, let me be part of it all. Share your dreams with me. You may be right, you may be wrong, but say that you'll bring me along to the world you see. To the world I close my eyes to see. I close my eyes to see. 'Cause every night I lie in bed, the brightest colors fill my head. A million dreams are keeping me awake. A million dreams, a million dreams. I think of what the world could be, a vision of the one I see. A million dreams is all it's gonna take. A million dreams for a world we're gonna make. For the world we're gonna make.
Again, a round of applause for the Chorus of Arts and Letters. A world we're gonna make, and I think St. Thomas More, as a statesman, as a saint, always thought of a world where he would want his people, us, to live. Not necessarily perfect, but a people that is just, a world that is just and is true for its people. With the lecture of Professor Baron, we, artlets, at least I can say for myself, is also dreaming of maybe one day I will be like him, talking in the St. Thomas More series with a line of speakers, distinguished lecturers that Professor Baron has mentioned and presented. It is a dream for all of us artlets to contribute and share our talents and excellence in this lecture series. We hope that with the inspiration that Professor Baron has shown us today, we at the administration of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, our faculty members, and you, our students, will look forward and continue in continuing this tradition of excellence, such as the St. Thomas More lecture. And to show our great appreciation to our guest lecturer today, we call on the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, Professor Melanie D. Turingan, the Regent of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, Reverend Father George Femang, OP, Assistant Dean, Assistant Professor John Manuel Cliachco, and Ms. Regina Pato Agustin, Chair of the Department of Asian Studies, to award our plaque of appreciation and our token for our speaker. Before I call on our distinguished lecturer, allow me to read. The University of Santo Tomas, Faculty of Arts and Letters, on its 60th anniversary, awards this plaque of appreciation to Professor Lino N. PhD, for his invaluable contribution as distinguished lecturer during the 57th St. Thomas More Lecture, given this 24th day of February in the year of our Lord 2025 at the UST Medicine Auditorium, University of Santo Tomas. Signed, Professor Melanie D. Turingan, PhD, Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, and Reverend Father George Femang, OP, Regent of the Faculty of Arts and Letters. Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished lecturer, Professor Lino N. PhD. May we also call on stage, together with our administrators, former Dean and current Dean of the UST Graduate School, Dean Michael Anthony Vasco, together with our former Assistant Dean, Ma'am Nancy Tabirara, to join us here on stage. We also call former Faculty Secretary Luis Ortiola to join us on stage. Luz Ortiola, I'm sorry. Ma'am Zenia Rodriguez to join us here on stage. All played significant roles in the previous St. Thomas More lectures. Thank you very much, and again, congratulations, Professor Lino Balon. We now move to the second part of today's event. On this occasion, we are happy to officially launch the book of Professor Lino Balon. And to tell us more about the book, may we call on the Assistant Director of the UST Publishing House, Assistant Professor Paul Castillo. A round of applause, please.
Reverend Father George Femang OP, Regent of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, Professor Melanie Turingan, PhD, Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, Professor Michael Anthony C. Vasco, former Dean and current Dean of the UST Graduate School, Professor Nancy Tabirara, former Assistant Dean of the Faculty, University administrators, faculty members, our alumni, and our dear students. Good morning. In honor of the faculty's patron saint, the lecture series was realized in 1968 from the vision of Ma'ams Piedad Ginto Rosales and Ma'am Ofi Di Malanta, the poet and later would become the dean, which saw the genuine desire to satisfy one's thirst for knowledge through continuous scholarly engagements. The lecture series has demonstrated for 6 decades that intellectual discourse is at the core of the university life, of the AB life, strengthening scholarly pursuits and raising awareness of advancements in numerous fields of study. And this book, which, by the way, you should buy outside, available at a special discount price only for today, na makita nyo sa elevator pag palabas na kayo, we also accept GCash, debit, and credit cards. Wala kayong takas. Kidding aside, and this book by Dr. Lino Baron is a testament to this commitment to the intellectual life, anchored on spirituality and social consciousness, captured in the pages of the volume that sums the years 1968 to 2019, making the book Celebrating More a time capsule of sorts of the first half century that will give its readers a glimpse of the Thomasian AB history, which makes it more important as we celebrate this year the 60th founding anniversary of our dear Faculty of Arts and Letters. And if I may, gaya na sinabi ni Sir Baron kanina, it is his wish na someone from AB would pick up where he had left off, covering perhaps 2020 and onwards until the centennial of the faculty. So, Sir Baron, that means kasama ka sa magiging feature ng librong yon. And with that, on behalf of the UST Publishing House and our Director Assistant Professor Benedict Parfan, may we present the first copies of the book to our dear author and my former professor, Dr. Lino Baron.
The author would like to give copies to distinguished guests as well, and may we call each one of them here on stage. We start off, of course, with the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Letters. Father George Temang Obi. Former Dean Mike Anthony Vasco. Assistant Dean John Manuel Piachco. Former Assistant Dean, Ma'am Nancy Tabirada. Our faculty secretaries, Ma'am Luz Arquiola. Ma'am Zenia Rodriguez. May we also call on behalf of the Vice Rector for Academic Affairs, may we call on Ma'am Corazon Saus to receive the copy on behalf of OBRAA, Professor Cheryl R. Peralta, DRPH. May we also call Dr. Rain Ledesma to receive copies on behalf of the library. the first batch, we also would like to call on representative from the alumni. May we call on Ma'am Maria Luisa Agregado. Professor Baron extends his gratitude to everyone on stage for their role, contribution one way or another to the St. Thomas More Lectures, particularly in the development of his book. Thank you very much. We would also would like to take this opportunity as well as mentioned by Assistant Professor Paul Castillo, all who would like to get a copy of the book, copies are available outside. This is your chance, although we see Sir Baron almost every day in the campus, in the building, but today is a special day for your book to be signed by the author himself. Hindi niya po yun gusto, pero sinasabi ko na po, may book signing po na magaganap. Wala po siyang choice. Again, this is a challenge for all of us to continue this excellent practice and to continue documenting the wonderful speeches and lectures of invited resource persons to the St. Thomas More Lecture. This is a legacy which shows how dynamic the Faculty of Arts and Letters is, whether it's in social sciences, humanities, arts, politics, governance, name it, Faculty of Arts and Letters can do it. To officially close our event, we would like to call on Assistant Professor John Manuel Arcliachco, PhD, Assistant Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Letters, for a closing remarks.
May libro po pala ako. Ayan. Kasi kaninang umaga, pagdating ko po dito sa may harapan, kumukuha po ako ng libro ng walang paalam. Nahuli po ako ng staff, sabi, ibalik ko daw po yung libro. Okay. May libro ako ha. Oo, sige. I was talking to Dean Melanie earlier. I was telling her, ka-age ko pala yung Thomas More lecture series. Pero hindi po ako 57 Kasi, basta, hindi pa. Okay. Madalas po slow ako actually. But when I learned about the title of Professor Baron's book, Celebrating More, hindi ko pa siya na-gets nung una. Sabi ko, ano ba yung more? Ano ba yung more na isi-celebrate pa ni Sir? Gusto pa niyang i-celebrate more. Okay. Nakakahiyaman pong i-admit. So, pasensya na Sir Lino. It took a while before I realized that it was St. Thomas More that you were referring to in your title. But then I thought further, was it mere wordplay? In the Faculty of Arts and Letters, I would like to believe that we really have more to celebrate. Our rich history, our illustrious alumni, our diverse programs, our capable academic staff, and our talented students. For me,
More is perhaps beyond St. Thomas More. It represents all that we are capable of. That there is more to AB than what meets the eye. That if you are looking for something more, then there can be more. We cannot be satisfied with what we have, but we can still aim for more. So thank you, Professor Baron, for your great work. Ang hirap siguro ng in-effort ni Sir. Nakailang tubig siya para matapos yung talk niya kanina. 50 years ba naman? Sinamarize niya for us. Nag-uusap kami ni Dean Melanie. Naalala mo ba kung sino yung nag-St. Thomas More sa inyo? Sabi ko, Ma'am, hindi ko maalala. Hindi yata kami yung napipiling mag-attend. Sabi niya, naalala ko yung sa akin. Para tayong nagbabalik sa nakaraan, and every time there's a speaker, there's a Thomas More lecturer that was being mentioned, tas binabanggit yung year, na-associate natin, ay siya yung nung time na ganito, ganyan-ganyan. So, hindi talaga natin pwedeng iset aside yung fact na napaka-relevant talaga ng St. Thomas More lecture. And I think that we gave St. Thomas More lecture the honor that it deserves. And it is not at all surprising, no, na yung talk ni Sir Lino and the book launching happened at this time when the Faculty of Arts and Letters is celebrating its 60th anniversary. Sabi ni Sir Lino, plus 50. Sa AB kaya, how many more years? Surely there will be more milestones to celebrate, more journeys to begin, more challenges to surmount. Marami pa pong darating as AB will continue to chart new paths and surge ahead. So thank you po. Thank you for coming to the 57th St. Thomas More Lecture. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you very much, Assistant Dean Kliachko. Since Assistant Dean already thanked all of us, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank various offices as well who helped us stage this Thomas More Lecture. We'd like to thank the Office of the Secretary General, the Office of the Vice Rector for Academic Affairs, the Communications Bureau, the Facilities Management Office, of course, the Office of the Dean, the different department chairs, faculty members, and to you, our students, for being with us today. Immediately after our lecture, those who would like to take the chance to have a photo taken with Professor Baron, you may do so. Again, minsan lang siya hindi tatanggi. Kasi pag makasalubong po natin siya sa hallway, on a regular circumstance, baka tumanggi siya, but today, hindi po siya tatanggi. To our distinguished guests, our reception will follow at rooms 110 to 116. To our faculty members, academic staff, we have food at room 204. To our students, let this be an inspiration to all of us to strive more, to be more, and to celebrate more. Again, thank you very much for coming to this morning's lecture. I am Louis Benedict Ignacio. We ask everyone to please rise for the singing of AB hymn and the UST hymn. Again, thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. Can we ask everyone to join us in a group photo